welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Welcome to Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. I am here with the author of a beautiful contemporary romantasy series, which will have you smelling ocean air as you read it. You can really tell how much you love the whole, like the whole place and the whole, just like everything about it. But first, let me welcome you, C.W. Rose, author of Ocean Song, and the upcoming follow-up. Is it Midnight Song?
It's Midnight Song, yeah.
It's Midnight Song, yes. Which the book is lovely. It is a romance between a young woman who is human or a land walker and a merman, which I love for so many reasons, if not initially for just actually seeing a book where it's a merman and not a mermaid, because we're so used to seeing the gender of, if a romantic interest is a mer person, it would be, female. And in this case, Caden is the mer-prince and he is a merman. And it really was just a nice flip on those tropes. But it's also a little bit of, it's a story about forbidden romance. It's a story about sustainability and just how we treat the earth and the ocean. And it's lovely. So welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us where the story of Angie and Caden came from for you.
Well, Jessica, thank you so much for having me. It's good to see you again after we met at the Gold Coast Book Fair earlier this year. It's had a lot of fun. I am C.W. Rose. I am a fantasy and romance author by night. I'm also a physical therapist by day. And I write about ordinary Asian women who find themselves in extraordinary circumstances and the cinnamon roll, not always human men who adore them. And when I'm not writing, I'm also an avid reader. I love to binge read books. I read books across all genres. I'm also a karaoke enthusiast. I'm a dog mama to a little dog that looks like an Ewok. He's a Pekingese named Sunshine.
I was going to ask because I saw that on your bio. I'm like, oh, what kind of dog is the dog? What's his name?
His name is okay. So his Chinese name is Shang Shang, which means smell good, but we call him Sunshine.
That's great.
I was going to show you a picture, but it's on my phone. I'm using my phone to record. But he is a little smush face, short little dog that's just all hair. And sometimes I love him, but sometimes I don't know which is the head and which is the tail when he's laying down. I make sure I scratch the right part of him. But yeah, I'm also an ocean child. I'm also I love the sea. I love everything about the ocean. I love the ocean air. I love swimming. I am also a certified scuba diver. I'm also a lifeguard. And yeah, it's all about ocean lover. I love everything about it.
So where did Angie's story begin for you? And did you kind of were you scuba diving and the setup kind of came to you? How did Caden's world start to build around you?
I really love this question. Okay, so let me start from the beginning. So about 10 something years ago, I don't remember what sparked this story, and I must have been going through something at a time. I wrote a book that was a mermaid princess that fell in love with a human man who was a dock worker. And it just became this really short, little novella. The human and mer were at war, and that was about it. So I wrote that. But at the time, like I said, I must have been going through something because it did have a tragic ending. The mermaid unfortunately died trying to save her human lover at the end. And I put that aside.
OG Little Mermaid, by the way.
OG, right exactly.
OG Little Mermaid.
So I don't remember if I saw the Little Mermaid or I was reading Romeo and Juliet. I'm like, oh, let's make this really tragic. Anyway, so I wrote that, put it aside, never looked at it again. And then about 3 years ago, I was on a cruise vacation with my family. And I was waiting for them, and I remember standing out at the balcony, and I was just watching the waves just rolling and crashing, just kind of staring at it while we were getting ready for dinner. So at some point, because you can't use your phone on there, I just started to wonder, like, what if I put my scuba outfit on right now? What if I just jumped in the water? What would be under there? Like, what kind of fish would I see? What kind of coral would I see? Would I see sharks or turtles? And then I, started wondering more, and I was like, what if I saw mermaids? And what if they existed, among us all this time, and we had no idea? Because the sea is the least explored place on Earth, right? So you never know. And from there, I kind of thought back to that mermaid story I wrote like so long ago that I had all but forgotten about. And I'm like, let me just take it. I'm going to revamp the whole thing. So the dock worker male protagonist turned to a female protagonist named Angie. The mermaid became a merman. And that's kind of where the bare bones of Ocean Song was born, was just from staring at the ocean.
So I Angie is like a lot of fun. She's got a lot of fire in her,
Thank you for
and
saying that.
yeah, she really does. And the dialogue in general with her and with Caden, like it's a lot of fun to read. I'm curious what your approach to writing dialogue is, because it's so, I mean, for me, when you read a lot, and I'm sure you get this too, it's like if you're reading something and you don't feel like this conversation can happen, it kind of takes you away. Reading fantasy with really good dialogue is golden because you're bringing your audience into this world where something is supernatural or not real, like dragons or mermaids or where folk. And in order to not just make you feel like this world is real, you
Mhm.
need to believe that these two people are not only going to fall in love, but their conversations are natural. So how do you approach writing dialogue?
Well, first, thank you for saying that that the dialogue was fun to read. So I do feel like it helps that I work in healthcare, so I talk to a lot of people, right? Like I try to go beyond conversations with patients. I try to get to know them, and I've met people from all walks of life, right? I met people who like to talk about themselves a lot, some people who are very quiet, and I still have to try to get them to open up a little bit, right? As their therapist, so they can trust me, and listen to me. Hopefully, not all of them do, but that is the hope. So I feel like talking to people from like all walks of life definitely helps. And I try to put myself into the character's shoes, right? I'm like, okay, so if I was in Angie's shoes, if I was in this situation right now, I'm sitting here, I'm staring at a merman. We're supposed to be at war with them, and I really don't like him because he's just being a jerk to me. I'm like, what? How would I react? Like, how would people around me react? Right? Like how would Angie react as I imagine her? Same thing with Caden. Of course, I'm not a mermaid. Sometimes I wish I was. I am not. And I do the same for him, right? I try to imagine like as I put myself in the place of somebody who's not maybe so familiar with the human world, and he's curious, and he is really upset with Angie because she's a human, she's destroying his home. I mean, and I love writing dialogue because I feel like it just gives me a place to put down all the conversations I have in my head. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I guess I could just make them talk like this, and yeah, but also fleshing out the relationship. Also, my editor helped a lot with that, so I do give them a lot of credit. They're like, okay, well, this is realistic, but this can be more realistic, and yeah, I just try to go by it as if I was really talking out with somebody.
Is there a character in the book that you wish you could have given more? I'm going to say screen time, even though that's not
Yeah.
how this works because there's no screen. But let's say screen time
Mhm.
too in this particular book that we might see more of coming up. Are you allowed to say?
I can say, yeah, my publisher hasn't given me any like restrictions on what to talk about. I just obviously can't talk about any spoilers.
Of course.
Yeah, but two people or three people actually that I wish I could have given more time to was, Cyrus and Adriel, which is Caden's brother and his sister-in-law, right? Essentially in the mer world, and also Mia, Angie's sister. So they do make an appearance in book one. Like I kind of skim on the surface of like what they're like, but in book two, oh, how much can I say? So with everything that happened in book one, right? Like I was given a chance to kind of delve more into like Mia's emotions after the fact, and how she's handling what happened in the book one with, without saying what happens. And also, I got to delve deeper into Caden's point of view, which was fun, and also where his whole like mindset comes from and why he is the way it is. And also give him the chance to interact with Cyrus and just watching them interact versus having Angie there, right? So I got to give also them a little more screen time and also their children, which I have at the end of the book.
Yeah, because it
Yeah,
was I had read somewhere that initially it was supposed to be a dual POV book.
yeah.
Was and I know that the edits changed a little bit in how things go through it. Did you find it easier to write, to live in just Angie's head for this particular book? Or did you kind of find Caden sort of screaming in your ear like, "Hey, what about me?"
I did, yeah, I see. I see. I really did want to have it be dual point of view. I mean, I knew that book one was more of Angie's story, so she was going to take a more of screen time regardless, right? So the way I had it was I had a part one and part two. So part one was just Angie, and the part two was a dual POV. When I submitted to agents and editors, a lot of them, well, the ones that give me feedback, they suggested cutting it down to just one POV, and also to shorten the manuscript, right? Because especially as a debut author, generally publishing doesn't really want anything over 100,000 words because it just costs so much to produce a book, right? Of course, when you're more well known, they're okay with publishing longer books. But when you first start out, they say keep under 100K. And the only way I could get it to under 100K words was if I took out Kana's point of view. And it was,
Interesting. Yeah.
yes, that's something I learned recently. I'm planning to dive back to Aquarium Trenches with my next book, with the book I just wrote, which is separate from Ocean Song. So I'm like, okay, I gotta cut this down. Gotta cut this down. One POV for this book. So Kaden did have some parts in it, but I did, and I wish there was some parts where I could have put his point of view. So I took all of that actually and put it into bonus content for book one.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting because I do see a lot of books recently that do
Yeah,
have dual POV, but I wasn't even thinking about word count in general. This is your
yeah.
debut novel.
Mm-hmm. Of
I want to ask you a little bit about that, but I'll come
Yeah, of
back to it.
course.
I wanted to also ask you just about like your approach to world building with the merfolk and their politics and how their court worked. Did you use any examples from history or from different culture? How did it sort of come together for you?
Oh, so the fun part is I got to go way more into more politics in book two, right? Because a lot of it is from Kaden's point of view. And so for book one, in terms of world building, I did take a lot from my own culture. I am Chinese American. So I took a lot of my own culture. For example, like Caden is the spare, right? Because he has an older brother, and his older brother is meant to inherit the throne. And he always felt like he was kind of like lagging behind his older brother. I do explain this. I do explore this a lot more in Midnight Song, right? So because also in like Chinese culture, like usually it's the oldest son that inherits everything traditionally, and then usually the younger siblings are meant to support the oldest sibling, oldest son, I should say. I believe it's the oldest son, or if the oldest is a girl, I believe the son still gets it, regardless, right? Very patriarchal, traditionally. So I followed a lot of that. In terms of the world building and building the actual world, I start very big and I go small. At that point, like I imagine like okay, they have a palace, and then like what happens now? So at that point, I still written from Kata's point of view. I was having him go here and here. I'm like, okay, well, where would he need to go? And then I start building piece by piece from there. Of course, it did change a lot with the edits. My editors wanted me to do more world building. They wanted me to add more to the more world, and they also wanted me to explain the magic a little more.
It's got to be really hard to keep it succinct, like in within a
Yeah,
100,000 words, but then they're like, but explain more.
they're like explain more of this. They're like expand the relationship, expand the world building. I can't really visualize the palace. I'm like okay, so let me go back and add more words.
But I do want to talk a little bit. So this is your, as we
Yeah.
mentioned, this is your debut novel and soon to
Yes.
be, you're soon to have two, and it sounds like three. How
Yeah.
long have you been writing for?
Been writing since I was 8. So, I mean, I never really set out to be a writer. I feel like, you know, how some entertainers say that, oh, you know, like acting or singing found me. I like to say writing found me. I wrote my first book, which was a picture book about fishes when I was 8. So maybe it was an omen to what I wrote now. And then after that, I don't recall really writing again until I was about 12 or 13, and I was like watching Disney movies, and I would wonder, and I don't remember exactly which one it was, but I would think about like, what if this had a different ending? What if something else happened? And then I started writing Disney fan fiction. That's how I started. And then from there, I started writing like novellas. And then I think I wrote my first novel at 16, which actually, I actually just took that novel, revamped the entire thing. And that's the book I just finished writing. Something totally different. And that's what I'm going to throw that to the quarry trenches and see what happens with this one.
That's awesome. It's really nice when somebody just talks about their journey for storytelling, but you kind of realize you've always been a storyteller.
I've always had
Yeah.
stories in my, I've always had like things like stories in my head. I'm like, I want to write them down. I have characters in my head. And I love to wonder like, what if? So
Yeah.
a lot of my books are, you know, grounded in a modern world. Because I was like the one like, what if dragons existed in our world? We found out dragons existed, or like demons existed. Like, what would we do? How would people react? Right? You know, so that's why I want to explore Ocean Song and Midnight Song. It's like, okay, how would people react if mermaids were real?
And I think that that's one of the things that's so compelling about contemporary fantasy and
Hmm.
contemporary romantasy is that it feels very grounded.
Yeah,
It's not necessarily like you're relearning the wheel or
yeah, for sure.
how certain things work. You have a connection already, but
Hmm.
you just expand that connection.
Yeah, and that always fascinated me, right? Because especially as a diver, sometimes I dive. It's quiet underwater. You don't hear anything, right? It's everything's silent. You can't talk. You can't really hear much. You just hear like water in your ears, and you're just like swimming and swimming, swimming. And then I'm just like, okay, what if a mermaid just popped out? Like, how would like me and my diving group react? Would we be like, oh my God, oh crap, and take pictures? Would we just stare at them? Would we be like, is this a joke? And I really like playing with that.
What are some of your favorite books that you like to read?
I love so many books. I want to say I love romance, right? Of course, I love romance and fantasy. I'm definitely I mean, you know, I was a big fantasy romance reader for a long time, which probably shouldn't come as a surprise. But I also love thrillers. I love psychological thrillers. You know, I really like them. I sometimes read them as like a little palate cleanser, like a quick read if I want to get my Goodreads reading challenge, you know, like amount of books up. So I'll read a quick psychological thriller. I can usually blow through those in like 2 or 3 days. And I really like I've also dabbled in like literary. I've read a couple of memoirs. So really for me, sci-fi romance is another one I like too. So really for me, like the genre doesn't really matter as long as the hook and like the blurb is compelling and something that I feel like I want to read more about or I can relate to.
One more thing before we get going. There
Yes,
is some spice in this book.
yes.
How do you approach that in general? Writing, I guess, not fade to black or just something that's a little bit spicier.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun because I like reading spice, right? I like reading spice, but I have a certain level that I don't really like to read. So I try to adhere
Yeah.
to I don't want it to be fade to black. I want people to know what's happening, but I want it to be more like emotional, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Instead of describing,
Yeah, you
yeah,
feel connected to the characters and you're like, good for them. This is
yeah,
happening. Yeah.
exactly. Like I don't really like writing about body parts and what's going where and who's doing what. I'm like, you know, I don't mind reading it, but for me writing it is just a little awkward for me personally. You know, and I try to go about it as like, okay, is this something that well, actually, I shouldn't say that. I was gonna say, is this something my family could read? I never want my family to read my spice part. My family bought my book, and I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything to them. All right, I'm like, I'm just gonna not say anything. Yeah, but I approach it as maybe like a 2 to 3 out of 5 spice level. I want the characters to come together. I want them to have, you know, that bond. I want them to be together in that way, but I don't want it to get too graphic, right? And I know some people have told me that this is something that they would feel okay with, like their older teen reading. I'm like, okay, that makes me feel a little bit better.
Yeah, but I think that it's interesting because, there's a place for all of it. And I
Yeah, for
think,
sure.
like personally when I'm reading a romance book or, I want to feel like you said, like the emotional connection is
Yeah.
really, really important. And, for me, and I have friends who are librarians and just readers in general, and they're like, listen, if this isn't happening in the first 30 pages, I don't want to hear about it, which is totally not me, but that's fine. That's
But some people love that, yeah.
yeah,
But I feel like if I know that this is something that's gonna be very spicy, I
yeah,
don't mind. I don't
yeah,
mind. I mean, I prefer slow burn, but
yeah, yeah,
but once in a while, I'm like, I don't mind reading something with spice that happens in the first 30 pages.
yeah. Well, it is nice to have a nice steady burn that takes
Hmm.
place under the ocean.
Yeah, that was interesting, right?
Yeah,
My reader
right.
thought so too. Oh my
But it
gosh.
is, yeah, but no, it really is, it was really just a fun story.
Oh,
I
thank
really
you.
liked the characters. I think readers, I mean, as you can tell, and you got some fabulous blurbs from like amazing romantasy authors, by the way.
Yeah, I
Like
know.
I was,
I felt very
yeah.
lucky.
So I'm really excited to see what comes out next and what what your future holds as an author because
Well, thank
Ocean
you.
Song is a great debut.
I really appreciate you saying that. That means a lot to hear.
All right. So once
Yeah.
again, this was Jessica with Syosset Libraries Turn the Page podcast. Ocean Song is already out. It's Hey Hey Books is your publisher.
Yes.
And Midnight Song, when does that come out? It's this fall, correct?
Yeah. So I got a release date very recently. So it is November 11th,
Nice.
which is it holds a special place to me. It is Veterans Day, and actually my work is with veterans, so so it does mean a lot to me that it comes out that day.
That's actually lovely.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. So check it out. And thank you so much, CW Rose. We are going to close this chapter of Turn the
Yay.
Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.